You see that okay?
Sure can. Looks great.
Okay.
Welcome, everybody. This is Josh Walitt with Walitt Solutions. We'll be starting in a few minutes, so get comfortable. You should be able to see the screen that Cindi has shared. So we look forward to talking with this group today. Again, we'll start closer to the top of the hour, and we'll be back then to introduce ourselves and talk on this interesting topic of appraisal modernization, which captures a lot of different topics. So I'm glad you're here.
I think we have someone not on mute that I'm not able to mute. There we go. And you're on mute too, Josh.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I was I was actually trying to ask her. Folks, let's go ahead and get started. And we did have that reminder to please mute yourself when you're not speaking. If you do have a question, feel free to take yourself off mute, but put yourself back on mute. That way we don't get any weird feedback or background sounds. But welcome today. I am Josh Walitt, joined with Cindi Harris. We're both with Walitt Solutions, and we're here today to talk about appraisal modernization. We're going to touch a bit on workflows, technology, industry readiness. What do all of these things we're talking about mean to you and your organization or institution? What are some of these big changes that are happening? And so we want to share with you, we, as Walitt Solutions, we work with a lot of different players in the mortgage and lending and compliance ecosystem. So we will work with appraisers, appraisal firms, AMCs, lenders, as well as state regulators, even in certain cases. So before we move on, I do want to send a special thank you out to ValueLink for sponsoring this and bringing this to all of you today. Valuable information so you can get yourself and your teams ready. So let's go ahead and jump to the next slide there. And again, a reminder to folks, please keep yourself on mute so we are not hearing your background noise. A little bit about myself. I am the owner and principal consultant of Walitt Solutions. You can see a little bit about me, but generally my background, I am a certified residential appraiser out of Colorado, and 5 years ago started the consultancy Walitt Solutions, where we help all different kinds of clients. We are generally thinking of ourselves as a sort of puzzle piece that is different for each client. And we fill in the gaps where folks need education, other guidance related to valuation, compliance, or regulations. And I'll let Cindi introduce herself, and she's going to walk us through this, and you'll hear from both of us. But I do want to encourage you, type in the chat if you've got questions. Take yourself off mute if you like to ask a question, but otherwise keep yourself on mute. Cindi, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Cindi Harris. I'm a senior valuation consultant here with Josh at Walitt Solutions. I've been an appraiser for multiple decades. I'm very passionate about the industry. I love where we're going. I'm super excited about UAD 3.6. I talk about it every day, and I feel like I talk about my favorite things more and more each day, because I think we'll get some really great improvements out of it. So excited to talk to all of you a little bit about that today too. So we will go ahead and kick it off. Oh, but a quick note before we begin, some housekeeping items. I'll run through this really quickly. Information and opinions expressed in this presentation are not made on behalf of and do not represent the positions or opinions of any board or organization, coalition, educational provider, or other group. Walitt Solutions is not an appraisal management company and does not provide appraisal management services. This presentation is not legal advice, an appraisal, or an appraisal review. Where specific rules, forms, or specifications are referenced, attendees should consult the published Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac UAD documentation for authoritative guidance, which we'll give you all of that contact information on one of these slides as well. So hopefully today, after spending some time together, what you'll take away is some more understanding about UAD 3.6, that what it really is versus just an update. It's not just a mere update in reporting. Talking about operational changes that really need to occur through this transition, and thinking about this modernization in a way that really elevates the appraisal practice and will also improve on customer service. We all know short term, right? There's definitely going to be some friction and pain, but when we get through that, we're going to see a much improved process. Successful adoption, what that looks like, what everyone needs to do to get prepared for that implementation, and then what does better collateral data do for us? How does it really benefit us? And we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to touch on the valuation methods just a little bit about what will be ordered now, right? You'll order a uniform residential appraisal report, but you may indicate also the valuation method. So we'll talk about that briefly as well. So why does this matter to us? Right? Why does UAD 3.6 matter? So really, we're in this big transition, and we have this mandate or deadline kind of hanging over our heads, so to speak. But if we can flip the script on that and not think of this, ominous deadline that's coming, but rather dive in looking at what are the process improvements we're going to achieve. So think about outcomes instead of deadlines. I'm not saying not to think about the deadline, because we do have to be prepared for that, but it's really about the transition itself, that if we can get on board with that, it will make a significant difference. And then structured data expectations. Well, I think it makes sense to create some consistency in our process. Sometimes people are afraid of structured data because what's going to happen? They're going to take the people out of the process. And I don't really believe that's true, at least not anytime in the really near future. But what it does in the meantime is it makes our worlds easier. Despite the hump to get there, it will make reading appraisals much easier than it is today. Operational scalability. That's really going to be a requirement, right, of working through this. We're going to have to leverage technology. We have to compete with market demands. The mortgage industry has to move along with the rest of the world. We know it's daunting because there are so many moving pieces and parts. but collectively, we need to work together through this. And valuation is part of the ecosystem. And this is kind of the chance to stand up and say, let's pay attention to valuation. This is an important piece, not just a friction piece, but one where we can become more collaborative again. So there's opportunity there for sure. And then appraisal readability, I sort of reference that along with structured data. Having sections and fields being consistent really increases the readability of the appraisal product, because today there's really no uniformity and everyone does it a little bit differently, and the addendums look different, and where you find things is different. So it really detracts from any sort of efficiency in operations. And we have a lot of back and forth on revisions and corrections and lender overlays and things like that. Whereas the GSEs have really said, this is what we want. We don't need a copy of your appraiser's license, or we don't need this or that or the other, right? Some of the overlays you see in engagement letters, this is our chance to take a step back and look at those and say, if my investor doesn't want this, why am I including it? And if it's because of a regulator, then let's have conversations with the regulators. This is a chance to clean up kind of the mess we've created, ourselves, between us and the regulators over the years. So we should take advantage of that. And then the other thing that matters really is that we're improving quality and turn time, and then again, readability of the appraisal. And so will all those things happen on day one? Absolutely not. Are we going to have a little bit of back and forth on quality until we figure out exactly what we're doing? Yes. Will timelines significantly improve right away? No. Will they in the future? Absolutely yes. Because appraisers are going to be able to do their jobs more efficiently. So if anything, though, the big takeaway is the GSE timeline is critical. They haven't changed it. We need to look at the big picture so that we focus on meeting it again, not like this thing hanging over our heads, but thinking of the future outcomes once we get through it. I don't know, Josh.
Just a quick. Oh yeah. Actually, I was just going to chime in. I would be curious if you're live on the call. Obviously, we know some folks are watching the recording, but type into the chat if you have actually seen one of these new reports. It would just be, I think, interesting to us. And to Cindy's point, it's been 8-9 years that the GSEs have been working on this modernization of the report. And, again, to her point, we're not looking in 9 different places because 9 different appraisers may have written these reports and you don't know where to find it. They have looked at what are Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac policy. So there's now a question and an answer set for each policy issue, instead of looking for, if we may have underwriters on here and say, yeah, I always have to search for these 6 different sentences somewhere in the report. Well, now there's actually a piece in the data set to say, is this the case? Is this the case? Is this the case? And you have your answer right there. So I just wanted to add that detail, that there's sort of an end in sight to that hunting around for, does it meet the policy? Well, now there's actually a question for most of those critical policy questions.
Mm-hmm. No one wrote in the chat. I'm maybe wondering, does that mean no one has processed a 3.6 file yet?
That may be the case.
Or nobody wants to tell us?
Or right. No, maybe they're having nightmares about, I don't know. There's no reason to worry about it. It's just change that we're all going to learn how to move through, but it has to be intentional.
Yes, 100%. And so kind of a very elementary look at the 3.6 infrastructure is, if you look at the old world, we have all of the separate forms and an addendum that could have exhibits, photos, narrative, etc. And with a heavy reliance, right, on narrative that doesn't really exist in a place where you can, read the report and it flows together. And in the new world, we have one report that's dynamic, where now we can have the information we need and not have to look at information that we don't need. And then the hunting and looking for things goes away, and the even the exhibits and just finding things, it's so much more improved. So again, this is a real oversimplification, but at the highest level, this is what we're looking at. And we'll talk about later how many places this change touches. I mean, it sounds simple, but all the way from ordering, communication to delivery, there's a lot of changes that go along with this. For me personally, I'll let Josh chime in too, but there's nothing I really don't like about what the new report looks like, honestly.
Yeah, I don't know if I have any sort of bones to pick with the creators of it. I mean, it's well laid out. It looks modern. It sort of it mirrors a lot of other documents we might be used to looking at. It has a section for everything, a field for everything. It follows a good storyline in general in terms of the order of the sections. And it really is, uniform. We never really had uniformity before, even though it was still called a uniform report, because there was so much text addenda. So for those of you trying to wrap your brain around, what to degree these reports have changed, is there's no text addenda. There is no, I need to make the report my own because there's not enough space on this frozen typewriter form. It now expands and collapses, and it's wonderful. I won't get ahead of myself here or ahead of our presentation here, but it's a real improvement. It's a real improvement.
Yeah. So some of the fears, I guess, right, is that UAD 3.6 is not an automated appraisal. And some of the new software providers have some AI tools built in. They are not replacing the appraisers. The appraisers have to understand how to use any new tools, if they're using AI for some of their narrative, they're still responsible for every bit of that. So it's not taking their place, it's helping them be more efficient. It's not the methodology is the same. I've heard some people ask, well, does this mean now that the appraisers will come in low? Well, someone asked that, will the appraisers come in low now because of this? And it's no. The methodology and the process that the appraisers go through is not changing. And we did talk about this earlier too. It's not a guarantee that everything's going to magically be better and faster. We know that we have to get through the learning curve, and then yes, I don't think there's a world where it doesn't get better based on the changes that are being made. And it's not just a new form replacing the other forms. Mm-hmm. It's a dynamic report, data driven. It's kind of like if this, then that. If something is relevant, then this opportunity becomes available to report about that. Sometimes it's a required reporting, sometimes it's only if relevant, and sometimes you'll report things multiple times. But what UAD really is a modern way of appraisal reporting that is, again, data-driven, flexible, standardized, and long-term, it will help us to make better risk decisions, to use that data collectively, for modeling, maybe eventually better predictability in markets and things like that.
And the key word here is reporting. It's modern appraisal reporting. It isn't to anyone on here, and I know we have non-appraisers as well, who might not know all the ins and outs of the process. This is not changing how appraisal, the process, works. Appraisers are still going to be estimating adjustments using the same data focused methods they have been using. It's not changing how they conduct a highest and best use analysis. They're still doing the process the same. It's just the layout, how it's organized, the level of detail, and the sort of placement of everything is really what's changing. But this isn't going to affect, values are going to be higher or values are going to be lower or anything like that. Nothing to do with the process per se.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's an important thing to remember. And so in essence, I think, like we've been saying, this is really about creating opportunities for all of us to fix the things that haven't been working. And I think we'd all be crazy to say some things aren't broken in the way we do things today. We have, inconsistent reports. We have to decipher what the narrative is, because everyone's writing different things, and the form doesn't necessarily help tell the story. So we're looking at narrative, and the narrative doesn't always provide enough representation of what the appraiser is actually trying to say. And then we have the back and forth of revisions, and a lot of that comes from the narrative, because someone can't find in the 5 or 6 pages of narrative, written narrative, what what they're looking for. And so this creates back and forth. The data is definitely difficult to leverage, because we've got appraisers using abbreviations, and they're all different. None of them use the same ones, and some of them don't use them, and some of them do. So the data is just not clean. So when it's not clean, it doesn't make it highly useful. So the opportunity we're going to get out of this is more consistency, definitely more transparency, efficiency, better readability, just overall communication. And I would bet on this, that over the next few years, we'll definitely see a reduction in revisions, as long as we don't continue to create our own problems by adding things that we want that are over and above what the investors want. So I think if we can stay as closely aligned to that as possible, that will help us improve.
Yeah, I think if you take one thing away from this, it is just that. It is, and I remember this from probably 13, 14 years ago, when I spoke at a conference, and someone was from another country, but they were starting a company here, and I was just talking about consistency and knowing what different clients want, and knowing what FHA wants, and what all these different layers. And they came up to me afterwards and they said, I think you hit the nail on the head. In other countries, there is a standard, and this is what you get in the report. But here in the US, it's about 956 different flavors of what clients ask for. And if we can stick with the standard now, which meets many, many policies, I think that's going to be a good way forward for that. It will also, some of you tuned in to our previous presentation with ValueLink talking about AI. Think about how appraisers are leveraging AI and other tools, and they're designed around a common data set and common reporting format. So if you play with it with your organization, you're going to expect longer turn times and more revisions and things like this, because the industry is not designing it around 956 standards anymore. It's designing it around one.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So when we're thinking about operations and the modernization that will come with this UAD 3.6 upgrade, is we have to look at workflow design, vendor management. That would be both AMCs and appraisers. Who's ready? Who can do 3.6, 2.6? Both, because granted, not everyone sells to the GSEs. So that will be something to think about. Whether you want to upgrade as well, if you're not selling to the GSEs, to help the overall flow of the industry, because then an appraiser can use the same data set on all of their work. Looking at turn times, how are we going to mitigate that during this transition time? How that's going to be communicated? Quality control, a new review process, different SSRs, AMCs are getting Fannie CU. How are we going to manage escalations, especially when maybe you have an appraiser that's stuck with their software? I know, and to be fair, I'm not saying that's necessarily an appraiser issue. A lot of the appraisal software is going through constant upgrading and patches and fixes and modifications. And so I think we need to be really strong on communicating to all of our partners, whoever they may be, depending on, you know, what roles you all play. And that's preparing them, preparing everyone in the transaction for, we're going through an industry change. There could be some hiccups. We're doing everything possible to keep this seamless. I think that upfront communication sets the expectation where no one's going to be disappointed or caught off guard or shocked that, that there's a problem. Technology, and I don't mean to pick on technology here, but I think there definitely could be some struggles here, right? We've got a lot of different integrations and things like that will need to get the kinks worked out of on all sides, right? It's not always super easy. Once it gets going, it's fantastic. And then how are we going to use the data? And then continuing to look at future automations as we go through. And then from a strategic perspective, how can we continue to scale? How can we improve the customer experience? And we have a lot of different customers, right? We have the consumer. The appraiser to some degree can be a customer, right, of some of the software platforms. And even if you're an institution that has your own web-based program, we're all customers in this in some way, shape, or form. So strategically looking at how we can reduce friction at all those different points. And then overall risk management. And so that's going to be, how can we improve, the quality control? How can we improve kind of locking down our technology to make sure we have, fewer and fewer issues as we move through this transition.
Yeah. And I think too, a lot of you are here because you use the ValueLink system, and of course that goes back to this technology. Are all the, and of course they're 3.6 ready, but I mean it's not just, oh hey, we use. Think about all the other pieces that come in and enter. And you're talking to all of those parties and making sure it's all working and it's all tested. And another thing in terms of operations, just taking a real quick look at turn times, just maybe a really oversimplified illustration. Cindi talked about turn times, but think about now we're talking about different products in your system. We're not talking about the 1004 or the 2055 or the 1073. We're talking about a URAR 3.6. Well, okay, but what's the scope of the inspection? Is it the desktop? Is it the hybrid? Because it's accomplishing all of those. Is it a 3-unit or is it a single unit with an ADU? It's encompassing all of those. So your measurement, your metrics, your evaluation of your panel and of your internal staff is all going to be measured in a slightly different way. You're going to analyze that data in a different way. You can't just look at one data point. You may have to look at 2 or 3 altogether to get full pictures. So just keep those discussions moving. I know when Cindi and I work with lenders and AMCs, these are some of the discussions we have. You need to have those internal discussions so that, folks understand all of the moving parts and the implications.
Yep, definitely. And I think I was just kind of mentioning this, that the customer experience and how the different stakeholders have different points of friction. And, a borrower typically wants it done quickly, right? Can never be fast enough. And then appraisers want clearer expectations. I mean, that's when it goes back to kind of the overlays. And now, this is an opportunity to just create, like, here's the data set, here's what's required, for each valuation method, et cetera. For AMCs, they want less back and forth, right? It's when the delivery of the appraisal is smoother, the viewpoint of that provider is elevated, right? Because you're not having to dialogue with them multiple times on one order. It's able just to move through the system much more easily. And lenders definitely want quality, right? That's the biggest thing for them from a risk perspective. I know turn time as well, but quality is something that stays, right? It's something that's important for them in the long term. And then investors want reliable collateral information. We know that. I mean, the GSEs have spent just short of a decade putting this together because it's that important for them. And to have created such a strong mandate for the whole industry and not moving from that really speaks to how much they want this change and this reliable collateral information. So I think we all have a part of this, and we're all going to be touched by it as we work through it. And then from a lender, this is mostly from a lender perspective, the operational areas for impact. And if you haven't started planning yet, right now is a great time. You've got a number of months to be ready for the 11.2 mandate, which I always want to make sure I remind everyone that 11.2 means what's delivered on November 2nd, 2026. Not you have to start ordering 3.6 on 11.2. You have to deliver on 11.2. So what that just means, you need to think about October as your starting point. So from a big picture, my first recommendation is create a cross-functional team to work through this for your organization. And that would mean making sure you have someone who's working on policies and procedures, what changes need to be made there. Everyone needs to be aware and educated. So internal training needs to happen. Then your operational and probably tech people working together need to look at the life cycle of the loan from order to post-close in your organization. What are all the touch points that need to be looked at and updated? And I venture to guess it's a lot more significant than you might think. And so then once you pinpointed all of those areas, you can engage your technology provider and start working through all of that. And I'm sure Value Link has all of the kind of methods and things needed to work through that. And then making sure your AMC, appraisal firm, appraiser partners, all of those partners are prepared. And I think from what I've heard is a lot of people are just sending mass emails asking appraisers, are you ready? Well, I get it, right? You want that information. And some of them might say yes, but they're really not. And some of them might say no, just because you're still mad. But I think the better question is, how can we help you? How can we help train you? How can we help show you what classes are available? What materials can we provide you? Because I think if we become, again, more collaborative and start working with all of our partners to say, okay, if you're not ready, let's work together and get us all there. Because cliche, but it takes a village, right? It takes all of us. So I just don't recommend sending out emails finding out who's ready. Just take it a step further if you're able to do that.
And this goes to ecosystem, right? I mean, I think not a week goes by where we don't say the word ecosystem at some internal meeting, and because it's about everybody. And when one of those links in the chain breaks, everything collapses. And so, don't take those "yes, I'm ready" at face value, like Cindy's saying. There's many further deeper questions that need to be asked. So, just keep that in mind. There's no reason for panic. There's a reason for planning, right?
Exactly
what we're talking about.
Planning over panic. I like that.
Yeah.
Like that. So this slide here really is to get everyone to ask questions, right? And the questions would be, have we, just like I talked about, right? Putting that project together, have we mapped out the workflow? What's going to change? What are the overall changes to operations? Is our review department prepared? Are our appraisers and AMC prepared? Systems, when are we going to pilot? How are we going to measure? What's success, right? That's a big question. What is success? Is it getting one order done and completed? All right, success one. Now we can move on to our next one. But I think reviewer readiness is maybe being a little overlooked at this point. And I think part of that is there's not necessarily a consistent way, because I think today organizations have, some AMCs are proprietary software, and probably some lenders are beyond CU have some of that, and AMCs are just now getting CU, so they need to figure out how they're going to leverage that, and the GSEs do have training for that. So I would make sure if you're an AMC to sign up for that. But I think we need to think about reviewer readiness in terms of what they do today might not look the same as what they do tomorrow. And what are the expectations of the reviewer versus the appraiser versus the GSEs? If the GSEs have told us, and they have, this is what we want, then why would we ask for more than that? Or, why would we challenge that? Mm-hmm. Now, if a reviewer is challenging methodology and value and comps and things like that, that makes total sense. If you're saying, well, this field is blank or something like that, but yet the data spec went through the system fine, then there's no reason to over review and over challenge some of those things. So it's getting that together, practicing that. I think we need some reps on that so that we can then build P&Ps around what those reps look like. Then confirming with your lenders, like getting in sync with if you're an AMC, getting in sync with your lenders with the AMC. This is what we want to see. This is how we want to approach this, and then making sure the GSEs are on board with it. And right now, I'm not saying that they weren't before, but right now especially, they're very available and they want to work with everyone, and they just want to see us all moving forward. So I have not seen them be unhelpful in any way, shape, or form. So reach out and engage them now, because right now is the time when they're working through this change with people, versus if you wait, the change is going to happen to you more than you being part of it. So that's my encouragement for getting involved early. And then technology, and again, Value Link, I would reach out to them as well, asking everything you want to know about the platform in 3.6, integrations, making sure those are, tested and all of that. How to order, you tested delivery, how's the new reporting going to look? What do you want to track? Again, what does success look like? And then just knowing which of your partners they're ready to connect with you, and then end-to-end, right? End-to-end testing, super super important. And now is definitely the time to do it, because I think everyone has the time and attention focused on this.
Well, and even what you want to also have discussions with is sort of yes, where are these technologies, where are these partners, but also what is on, having discussions on, what is sort of in the future, right? Because these, and I think early on, Cindi hit on the fact that there's more that can come of this. Right now, people are looking at sort of like, what's the minimum to get me functioning? But things like, okay, well, what appraiser softwares out there can actually take the data right from your ordering system? And so, the address isn't going to be typed wrong because it's actually flowing into it. The borrower name won't be typed wrong because it will flow into it. Those aren't necessarily items today, but those are certainly, where do you plan for the technology, the integrations, all of those abilities to go? And so really having a partner or partners that help you achieve better and better efficiency and accuracy is, that needs to be at the back of your head as well, not just someone that's always behind the curve catching up to what the industry is doing. So just, keep that in mind. You may not all be in that role specifically, but that is a seed to plant in your organization and to be future looking.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's a great point. And so again, right, what happens when you wait is that you don't have, you're doing training when like on the fly, and that makes everyone a little more nervous, a little less confident. You're much better off doing your training ahead of time, or train your trainer. If you're a big organization, train someone who can can help train everyone else. And don't forget that everyone who touches the process needs that training. So it's not just the reviewer. I mean, it's going to be anyone who's taking an order, who's talking to an appraiser, who's talking to a real estate agent or a loan officer, or right. We have to really take a step back and think, okay, who needs to be trained? And it's really anyone who's going to touch this, process at all. And then, you might say, okay, we're ready now, but then you might reach out to your vendors and they're not ready. So it's time to start asking those questions. What are their timelines? Can you help them? What's gonna, workflow disruption? Are we, as maybe valuation departments, telling our loan officers, you may experience some delays. Don't tell your consumer they're going to get their appraisal in 4 days like they have been. It might be 8 days for the next month or two because we're rolling out 3.6. These are the benefits to you in the long term, but work with us right now during this, period of time. Or maybe it's a communication where you say, let us know which files you're not in a big hurry on so that we can do a 3.6 with those. And if you have a rush purchase, we're not going to test on that, right? So it's that level of communication where you're not being disruptive because you're really focused on the readiness. Yes, revision cycles too, right? So that's all part of that communication. And we have to baby these first files and really pay attention to them. And then if you wait till the last minute, I can really just see a lot of confusion. That's where then communication breaks down further. You've got delays, you've got upset borrowers. It's not pretty, right? And I think the more prepared we can be, we won't be problem free per se, but it should be smoother and everyone understands what's going on. And so, preparing now just means getting a test group together internally with maybe a couple appraisers and a couple loan officers that are willing to just kind of get the whole little mini ecosystem together, right? To do a little project team to run some reps through. And so I think that really will help a lot. And then that team, if you have a little team that's practicing, then they can then help to further educate, throughout your teams. And, it's true. The transition date is not the starting line. It's the finish line. So we really have to get moving on this. And sometimes I think we don't know where to start. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't know where to start. So if you pull the people together, the group that writes the compliance, or writes the policies and procedures, you've got the head of operations, you've got the head of review, whatever that looks like in your different organizations, but start kind of writing a plan of action, and start small. You don't have to change the world, because do a few, and then you kind of understand where your problem spots are, and then you can focus on those.
Yeah. And just to give an illustration, again, with AMCs and lenders being on here, maybe not necessarily having the appraiser's perspective or talking with a lot of appraisers in terms of their business, but the appraisers are also looking at these exact same types of things. They're saying, okay, is my software ready, or do I have to go to another software? And that's literally what they're facing right now. So think of even, let's tie it back into you. Think of that panel management. It's not necessarily a simple question, but asking them some very detailed questions on what they're actually ready for, not just from their own training perspective, but from the software they use. It doesn't mean you have to necessarily ask what software, but just knowing, hey, are you ready in these respects? And that, that's going to be critical for you to be able to even just assign these types of orders.
Mm-hmm. I was just catching up on the chat there for a second.
Oh.
So how does better data benefit everyone? And I think it's pretty clear, right? We're going to have, just looking at this list here, we're going to have better reviews, quality control, similar thing, right? Analytics, risk visibility for sure, decision-making, long-term scalability. Those things benefit all of us. even at the macro level, the mortgage market, right? The more security we have in our mortgage markets, the more security we have, in our economy in general. But so really, it's just and Chuck mentioned it in his comments, right? It's just a really great improvement, and every stakeholder benefits, whether at the micro or macro level. But appraisers, right, they're going to have clearer expectations. They've got, with the standardized data, with kind of this if this then that process, they don't have to add a lot of things that they're doing today that probably don't benefit anyone, including themselves. The AMCs are going to benefit, right, from fewer revisions, maybe fewer ROVs, because there are some things in the new report that give the appraiser the opportunity to talk about comps analyzed, not used, which then lets the reader know, hey, if you wanted to challenge with these comps, I've already looked at them, and this is why I didn't include them in my grader analysis. Again, lenders, right, better collateral intelligence. Same thing with the investors. Then review teams. I mean, you would think as a reviewer, you would absolutely love this. Similar to the lender, when you can look at page 1 and see most of your risk indicators all in one place, in one snapshot, that improvement alone is huge. And for the same thing with the reviewer, right away they can spot, not all of it, but some of the areas that would be important to hone in on. And for the consumer down the road, they should see a faster, smoother process. And then, sorry, I was looking at the chat.
No, I just had something to comment too, just to sort of give an example to folks, sort of clear expectations for appraisers, fewer revisions. So this might be an oversimplified illustration, but think of, it's an FHA file, and the appraiser is required to include manually at this point the intended use statement that's required by HUD Handbook 4000.1. Well, it won't be anymore, because within the data set is some button or checkbox or toggle switch or drop down, whatever the software designs it around. It's going to say this is FHA, and voila, certain things appear and open up for FHA policy, as well as for certain FHA statements and things like that. So this is what we're talking about in terms of fewer revisions. Some of there could be, in the long run, more focus on meaningful revisions and meaningful questions, rather than these ticky-tacky things that a lot of you may feel like you're wasting time on, but you have to get it correct in this or that manner. So there's sort of hope on the horizon for that type of improvement in the overall process and entire chain.
No, exactly. I think that's when we kind of tackle the tasks at hand, but keeping one eye on the outcomes, right? So we know the outcomes are going to be improved. So keeping that kind of eye on the prize, so to speak. Sherry asked about the timeline on the other software companies. For ACI and Bradford, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I've heard things that both of them are getting close, but that's like rumor mill type information. But I don't have anything concrete on that, Sherry.
And I like this comment from Julie. I'm looking forward to know where to look when reviewing. That has been a big issue for many years. And I think that's actually, we teach UAD 3.6, all sorts of different classes and a lot of people think, oh, that education is for appraisers. Well, guess what? There's education. And when I teach education for appraisers, what they often say is, well, are you teaching this to the AMCs and the lenders? And the answer is yes, because we still need to know general valuation concepts that are being discussed. We still need to know now where to look, and guess what? It's going to be a consistent place every time, so we're not hunting. So I hear you, Julie. If you do have questions, reach out to us, because we can certainly do something for you there. There's a lot of resources as well. There's a lot of training available out there, but yeah, we do recognize that need, because we can think of it as an appraisal problem, and it's not. It's an ecosystem problem that everyone needs to understand these pieces. So I didn't want to get us off base there, Cindi, but I thought that was a good point that Julie brought up.
No, I completely agree. That wasn't off point at all. I wanted to just talk briefly about valuation methods. This, I'm not going to read through all these, but these are the definitions from the Appendix F, which can be found on the GSE's website. We have I think the final slide has, you can snapshot it if you want with the links to that. But there are 4 methods. I don't believe they are currently really using the exterior appraisal. Hybrids are available on most orders, but people aren't taking advantage of that too frequently at this point. Maybe when the market is really busy again, we'll see some more of that. But take a look at these, because when you're ordering, I think, and Josh, you referenced this early on, this is about the scope. So if you order a URAR, we still need to know what method. So in that ordering schema, that's something to remember. And so with the property valuation methods, we need to remember that it really, again, defines the scope of the assignment. It determines how the data is collected. Is the appraiser doing an interior and exterior? Is the appraiser just doing an exterior? Is a property data collector giving data to the appraiser who's doing it from their desk? Or is the appraiser doing it from their desk? And, just like Josh was talking about how the intended user FHA automatically updates via the software, however that looks like in each particular software, but the certifications are dynamically updated. So when the appraiser says, I'm doing a traditional appraisal, then that scope shown on the assignment part of the appraisal then automatically updates the certification to say, the appraiser did an inspection of the interior and exterior. So that scope is important, and it does update those certifications based on that. And then, the valuation method, once you've entered that, it helps drive the rest of the report that gets produced, right? It's putting those sections in there that are relevant to that valuation method chosen. Then just know, right, we talked about this earlier, the methodology doesn't change. The appraiser's responsibilities to USPAP, to everything that they're producing, that all of that, none of that, changes at all. So it's really more about the scope and then understanding how the data is collected, analyzed, and communicated. That's what that's about. And that's why it's going to be important in the ordering process to understand what valuation methods being requested. So leadership, I think this whole process, this whole project, we can call it that, really will take a lot of leadership. And that really means, getting organized, preparing early. Don't set your team up for frustration and confusion and anxiety by not communicating, by not preparing early. Not be supportive, right? If you want to scream, because it's frustrating and it's hard, don't do it in front of your team, right? Let's be as encouraging and supportive as we can be. And communication definitely reduces ambiguity. It creates more consistency. Make sure everyone hears the same message. We're doing this. We're starting now. Here's why. We're excited. We're going to help you through the problems. I think you can't communicate that enough. For organizational health, you have to communicate, re-communicate, over-communicate. Like, you have to deliver those messages repeatedly so that everyone kind of really soaks it in and starts to live the change versus hearing about the change. So that adoption and adaptation, all of that comes from one primary source, and that's communication. So I can't say enough how important it is to really start socializing all of this with everyone in your organization that will touch a part of it. So, and kudos to all of you for being here, right? Because I think the more people want to hear about it and show up to hear about it, that speaks volumes about, caring about how we get through the process.
Good question here. Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
to take a look at the chat here from Rhonda. It says, we recently stopped allowing AVMs due to the QC requirements around these, and we're contemplating appraisal plus property data offered by Fannie Mae. How would that integrate with these changes? And actually, that scenario speaks really well to these changes, because, at this point, it's still, not still, but it will be order the URAR, because this is an all-encompassing uniform report, but it will be, we need to get a property data collection. So then it's this hybrid path that Cindi was talking about. So it fits in there, but to the previous points, you need your policy and procedures. You need all of your teams understanding what it means and how does the workflow. So if it is the appraisal plus property data, we have this workflow channel. If it is merely a desktop, it is this workflow channel, and so on and so forth. So it is actually allowing the scenario that Rhonda's bringing up to occur in a more uniform, consistent way, with a report delivered at the end that is recognizable to everybody. But the key is you need to have those different workflows, because it will look different in terms of how you tackle that. So.
Yeah, and then Chuck, to your question, I know it's been done. I don't have the details around it, but I will ask the team over there if they have any examples of learnings from the total end-to-end with underwriter participation and everything, and then I'll share that, anything that I can get from that.
Yeah, that's a really good thought. Learn from other people's challenges and experiences. Always a good way.
Yeah, and Ken DeFeo from Fannie has been, anytime he's been speaking the most recently, he's been sharing the things that they've found that like didn't work, like little things that the appraiser maybe shouldn't do, or learnings, I guess. So those are being shared. So I'm sure that there's some kind of end-to-end like sharing that can happen as well. So
yeah,
we will find that out.
Yeah, and I will be presenting at 3 Hour CE later this year, 2026, at some conferences, and it's also available as non-CE if anyone needs to see some of the sort of the highlights of, here are some issues being raised with submissions of the appraisal reports, not necessarily feedback from underwriters as the question here asked, but in a broad sense of this part's being misused by some appraisers, and sort of those red flags that everybody in the ecosystem can look for. So again, the CE can be quickly turned to be non-CE for those of you not interested in that, but we'd be glad to share that type of information as we compile it on ongoing basis. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And this last slide, for anyone who needs this information, both Fannie and Freddie's sites are so good. They have so much information. It's well organized, easy to follow. And then there are reference documents. I think I referenced Appendix F in here in terms of where I got the definitions for the valuation methods. And so these three appendices in particular are very, very useful. There's a lot of information, so it's kind of scary at first, but Control F is a good way to find the information you're looking for. Or sometimes Appendix C actually shows every possible field that could ever be used in this new reporting format. It would never happen, but it shows everything that's possible. But if you're trying to find something relative to a specific field, sometimes going to Appendix C and then Control Fing Appendix F for that field helps you to find your answer a little more quickly, because Appendix F is 375 pages long. So if you Control F like something with the word exterior in it, you're probably going to get so many hits that it's kind of it's arduous to go through. So sometimes you can use the other one to cross-reference, and it helps you to find things more quickly if there's any underwriters or reviewers on the call. That's one way to find things a little bit faster as you're learning.
Yeah.
Guidance and definitions.
Especially since some reports will have XYZ components to it, and other reports won't because it doesn't apply to that property. It's not a multi-unit, or it's not manufactured, or it's not a condo. So you're going to see the first few, you think, oh, I'm getting used to it, and then all of a sudden something's missing. Well, check Appendix F. It might not be missing. As a matter of fact, the way these softwares have to pass these test scenario, it's not getting through if it's not correct. So if you need to answer that sort of question, like, why am I not seeing it in this report, but I did see it in a previous, Appendix F will be the very well spelled out explanations for every single field. So that's, I always like to call Appendix F your friend, because it just really, it has basically all the answers if you can connect some dots sometimes. So
yes. And so it looks like we have a minute left for questions.
Any last questions? You have our email there if you do need some resources or have some questions or think of something later, of course.
Thank you for the interaction. That's appreciated.
Yeah, some really good points and some really good questions coming up here. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions popping up. I'm not hearing anyone taking themselves off mute to jump in with a question. So once again, I want to thank ValueLink for sponsoring this series. We will have more in the series coming for you. And you can check out the previous session that we did. And looking forward to seeing you on other learning enrichment seminars. So thanks so much for being here. Have a great day. And relative to all these changes, you can do it. Just educate yourself.
That's right.